All right, so we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today. Disability benefits, never exactly like a walk in the park, right? But especially when you're talking about something as, well, as complex as PTSD.
It definitely can be a tricky area to navigate.
Exactly. And we're going to try to make some sense of it all. Like, can PTSD even get you SSI?
Supplemental security income.
Right. SSI. We're talking about that. We got some good legal stuff, some medical insights, and, well, that's what this whole deep dive thing's about, right? Getting to the bottom of it.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing here. And, just to kind of set the stage, SSI, that's a federal program, and it's aimed at helping people who are, well, they're struggling financially.
Okay, so limited income, not a lot of assets.
Yeah, you got it. They're making less than a certain amount each month, and their assets are, under $2,000, that kind of situation.
So it's not just like, oh, I have PTSD. It's like, how bad is it affecting your life, your ability to work, and can you even pay your bills, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's about that whole picture, how PTSD really impacts your ability to function in a work setting and how your finances are looking.
So let's say, someone's listening. They're dealing with PTSD, and they're thinking, okay, maybe SSI could help me. How do they, like, prove how severe their PTSD is to the Social Security Administration? It can't just be their word, right?
Right, and that's where you get into the whole medical evidence thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're talking like doctor's notes, therapist reports, that kind of stuff.
Exactly, and not just any doctor. We're talking about psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, anyone who has been treating you specifically for your PTSD.
Okay, so you got to have those specialists in your corner.
Pretty much, and the important thing is it's got to be detailed. The records can't just say, like, patient has PTSD. They need to paint a clear picture of, how it's impacting your everyday life.
So what kind of things should be in those records?
Think about the things that make it hard to work a normal job. Like, can you concentrate for a long time?
Yeah, focus is a big one for me.
Right. So that goes in there. What about handling stress? Social interactions, are those tricky? Memory problems? Sleep issues, all that stuff matters.
So basically, you got to show the SSA that PTSD is, like, preventing you from holding down any job, not just saying, I can't work.
Exactly. The more specific evidence you have, especially from a medical professional, the better.
Because, there's always that, like, skepticism, right? Some people might say, PTSD, that's not a real disability.
Yeah.
How do you address that?
Yeah, that's a harmful misconception we've got to tackle head on. PTSD is a serious mental health condition, it's not made up. And the symptoms, they're real, they're debilitating.
They're absolutely real.
Yeah, and the key is, like we were saying, demonstrating how those symptoms affect your ability to work,
Yeah.
consistently, reliably, any kind of job.
So even if your PTSD comes from, like, something really bad that happened at a past job, like a traumatic event,
Yeah.
the SSA doesn't care about that specific job, right?
Yeah. Nope, they're looking at the big picture. Can you function in any workplace? Can you handle the demands of a regular job? That's what they need to know.
Okay, so it doesn't matter where the PTSD came from, it's how it's affecting you now.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the evidence, the severity, now the actual application process, right? I mean, people hear horror stories about how hard it is to get disability benefits. What's your take on that?
I mean, it's definitely not a walk in the park, right? It's complex. It can take a long time.
So patience is key.
Big time. The SSA gets tons of applications, and each one needs to be reviewed carefully. It's a process.
So what advice would you give someone going into this?
Be thorough, be organized.
Dot your I's and cross your T's, basically.
Yeah. Don't leave any stone unturned. Include every single medical record that even mentions your PTSD. Seriously, don't leave anything out.
And I'm guessing personal statements are important too, right? Like not just the medical stuff, but your own story.
Totally. That's where you really get to tell your story, in your own words. How does PTSD affect your daily life, your relationships, your sleep?
Your ability to, just exist comfortably in the world.
Exactly. Paint that picture for them, make them understand.
Now, what if someone, believes their PTSD is a direct result of something that happened at work?
Like harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Should they be thinking about getting a lawyer?
A lawyer who specializes in disability claims. Yeah, in those cases, it can be a game changer.
Why is that?
Well, they can help you gather evidence, navigate all those legal complexities, and, if it comes down to it, they can represent you if you have to appeal a decision. Think of them like your Sherpa, guiding you through this whole mountain range of a system.
And speaking of finding help and guidance.
Mm.
I know there are also like local Social Security offices and disability advocacy groups that can be helpful, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those resources are amazing. They can give you information about the SSI program, help you understand your rights. Sometimes they even assist with like filling out the actual application itself. Don't hesitate to reach out. There's help out there.
So it's like having a team in your corner, fighting for you.
Exactly. You don't have to go through this alone.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The mechanics of applying for SSI with PTSD. And, I want to talk about something that doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah.
The connection between racism and PTSD.
Yeah, for sure. It's a heavy topic, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's essential to address.
Definitely. Because experiencing or witnessing racism, that can be deeply traumatic, right? Leading to a lot of the same symptoms we see in PTSD. The anxiety, the depression, flashbacks, hypervigilance.
Absolutely. And, there's often this feeling of like constant alertness, not feeling safe, even in places that should feel familiar.
And I've heard the term microaggressions used a lot in this context. What does that mean for those who might not know?
So microaggressions, they're these subtle, often unintentional forms of discrimination.
So it's not like overt racism, right?
No, it's often more insidious. Like it could be a backhanded compliment, an assumption about your intelligence or your capabilities, or being treated with suspicion or disrespect simply because of your race.
Like you don't belong.
Right. And on the surface, they may seem small, but I mean, the cumulative effect over time of these daily indignities, it's incredibly damaging to a person's mental well-being.
It's that whole death by 1,000 paper cuts thing, right? Individually, it might not seem like a big deal, but over time.
Exactly. It wears you down, takes a huge toll. And the research backs this up, People facing that kind of chronic stress from racism are much more vulnerable to a whole range of mental health issues, PTSD being one of them.
Makes you wonder, does the SSI system, does it fully understand this connection? Like, is there even a way to prove that your PTSD is because of racism when you're applying?
That's the million-dollar question, and it really highlights a big gap in the system. While the SSA recognizes PTSD as a qualifying condition, they don't have a specific category for PTSD caused by racism.
So if someone is dealing with that, how do they, make their case?
Well, that's where those traditional forms of evidence come in, medical records, therapist evaluations, things like that. It's about connecting the dots, showing how racism has contributed to their PTSD.
So therapists and doctors, they really need to be aware of this link, right? And document the specific impact of racism on their patient's mental health.
100%. It's about understanding the full context of someone's experiences and acknowledging that trauma can manifest in many different ways.
Because it's not just individual experiences either, right?
No, exactly. It's systemic. It's baked into our society.
So we need to be talking about that too, right? The systemic and interpersonal racism that contributes to this trauma.
Yes, and advocating for real change, broader societal changes, addressing the root of the problem.
Absolutely. So for someone listening to this thinking, okay, this is a lot, what do I do?
First, be informed. Be proactive. If you think your PTSD stems from racism, talk about it openly, honestly with your healthcare providers and encourage them to document specifically how racism has impacted your mental health.
And don't hold back.
And reach out to those disability advocacy organizations we talked about. They can offer support and guidance through the SSI process. You don't have to do this alone.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. So much to think about.
I'm glad we could shed some light on these issues.
So to sum it all up, getting SSI benefits for PTSD, it's doable, but it requires thorough documentation showing how your symptoms impact your work, and often it's helpful to have an expert in your corner. But, I mean, that's just the start, right?
Yeah, we've got to keep talking about this connection between racism and PTSD. We have to push for a more inclusive and equitable approach to mental health.
Absolutely. This is a conversation that needs to continue. So here's a final thought to leave you with. How can we as individuals and as a society do better? How can we support those struggling with the invisible wounds of PTSD, especially those whose trauma is rooted in racism?
It's a big question.
It is, but I think it's one we all need to be asking ourselves. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep advocating for yourself and for others.